You didn't come here for motivation. You came because something inside you recalibrated, and it cost you people. In the language of raising your vibration, this shift is often described as becoming more aligned, more grounded, less available for what drains you. But Carl Jung would name it more precisely. He would call it individuation, the slow, sometimes painful process of becoming your real self instead of the self you were trained to be. And here's the part no one prepares you for. When you move toward wholeness, you do not just feel lighter. You also become less compatible with relationships that were built around your self-abandonment. That is why the fear hits so hard. If honesty makes you lonelier, does that mean you're doing life wrong? Jung would say no. He would say you are finally withdrawing your energy from a persona that kept you socially safe but psychologically divided. The persona is the role you perfected to be liked and needed, the dependable daughter, the peacemaker, the one who absorbs tension so everyone else can relax. It can look like love, but it often functions like a contract. You stay agreeable, they stay comfortable. You see it in ordinary moments. A woman drives to Sunday dinner already tired. Her mother comments on her choices. Her sister makes a sharp joke, and the old version of her smiles changes the subject and swallows the sting. But this time, she pauses and says calmly, "I'm not discussing my body or my marriage tonight. If it comes up again, I'm going to leave early." Nothing dramatic, no shouting, just a boundary spoken in a steady voice. And suddenly the room shifts. Someone calls her sensitive. Someone laughs like it's a phase. Someone acts wounded, as if her self-respect is an insult. She didn't attack anyone. She simply stopped performing. This is where Jung's concept of the shadow quietly enters the room. The shadow is everything people refuse to see in themselves: the resentment, the control, the dependency, the need to keep you in your place. When you individuate, you become a mirror. Your growth makes their unexamined patterns visible, and that visibility feels like a threat. So they label you cold, selfish, difficult. Not because you became worse, but because you became less manageable. And that is the dark side nobody talks about. Raising your vibration does not always look like peace at first. Sometimes it looks like fewer invitations, awkward silence, and people treating you like a stranger simply because the old access points are gone. You didn't lose them because you became bad. You lost what was never built to hold the real you. The question is not how to get everyone back. The question is who remains when you stop disappearing. Your body catches the truth long before your mind can smooth it over with manners. You walk into a room and nothing is openly wrong, yet your chest tightens as if it has learned this atmosphere by heart. Your shoulders lift, your jaw sets, your breathing gets shallow. You smile, you nod, you play your part, and still your stomach churns, as if it refuses to digest what your mouth is trying to swallow politely. For many women who have spent decades being the steady one, the peacemaker, the emotionally responsible adult in every room, this is the moment that quietly scares you. You start wondering why your body feels like it is bracing for impact when everyone else seems fine. You start asking why love can feel like pressure and why familiarity can feel like a threat. You see it in ordinary life, not in dramatic crisis. A woman answers a call from her mother, and within minutes, her voice changes. She becomes smaller, sweeter, and more careful. The conversation is not overtly cruel, but it carries weight. Tiny criticisms wrapped in concern, subtle guilt delivered as tradition. A question that is really a request for you to return to the role that keeps the family comfortable. Or you sit in a work meeting where the language is polished and professional, but you can feel the undercurrent. A colleague smiles while competing. Someone praises you while quietly undermining you. You leave not tired from the work, but from the performance required to stay acceptable. Or you meet a longtime friend for coffee and notice that the entire connection depends on you holding their pain, validating their story, absorbing their anxiety, while your inner life remains politely off limits. You drive home and feel numb, not because you lack empathy, but because your system has been overdrawn. This is where raising your vibration becomes less mystical and more biological. It is not a trend or a mood. It is your nervous system drawing a boundary that your mouth has not learned to speak yet. Your body becomes a kind of inner polygraph. It responds to emotional dishonesty, misalignment, and self-abandonment with tension, fatigue, brain fog, and that quiet dread you cannot explain. Jung would say this is not random, it is the psyche insisting on coherence. The self, the deeper center of who you are, begins reclaiming energy from the persona, the social mask that once kept you safe, useful, and liked. And as that shift begins, your body stops cooperating with the split. The smiling version of you on the outside and the shrinking version on the inside cannot coexist for long without a cost. So when you feel your throat tighten before you say yes, when your body collapses after a family gathering, when sleep disappears after you keep showing up where you do not feel respected, Jung would not call that weakness. He would call it a message, a signal that your inner life is no longer willing to be negotiated away. And here's the question worth asking, gently, without judgment. What is your body trying to protect you from right now, and what truth is it quietly asking you to finally honor? It rarely happens with a dramatic announcement. It happens in a small moment that looks ordinary from the outside, yet feels irreversible on the inside. You hear yourself say, "I can't do that anymore," and you realize you mean it, not in anger, not to punish anyone, simply as a fact, the way you might state the weather. And after that sentence, something quiet collapses. The part of you that used to automatically adjust, anticipate, smooth, and apologize before you even knew what you were apologizing for. This is the most misunderstood part of raising your vibration. What dies first is not your softness. It is your persona, the version of you that knew how to be easy, the version that could make other people comfortable at your expense, and call it love. Think of the woman who has hosted every holiday for years, even when she is exhausted. She cooks, cleans, manages moods, makes sure no one argues, makes sure the difficult relative is handled gently, and makes sure everyone feels seen. This year, she says, "I'm not hosting. I'll come for dessert, but I'm not carrying the whole day." She expects mild disappointment. Instead, she gets shocked. Passive-aggressive comments, silence that feels like punishment. Suddenly, she is selfish. Suddenly, she is different. Nothing about her character changed overnight. Only her willingness to disappear did. Or consider the woman in a long marriage who always does the emotional work. She remembers birthdays, plans appointments, manages the family calendar, keeps the peace between children and relatives, and quietly absorbs her partner's irritability as if it is part of her job. One night, she says, "I want us to talk to someone. I can't keep being the only one holding this." She is not attacking, she is asking for reality, and the response is often not curiosity, but defensiveness. Why are you making a big deal? Why are you so sensitive? Why can't you let things go? Jung would recognize this instantly. When the persona collapses, the system that depended on it loses balance. Your old role was not only familiar, but it was functional. It kept everyone else from having to grow. Jung taught that the persona is a mask built for belonging, but over time, it becomes a prison when it is no longer aligned with the self. In midlife, many women reach a point where the cost of the mask becomes too high. The psyche begins withdrawing energy from performance and redirecting it toward truth. That is individuation in motion. Not a spiritual trend, but a psychological necessity. And once it starts, you cannot unsee what you have seen. You cannot go back to smiling through what hurts you. You cannot keep saying yes to stay loved when your body has already said no. Here is the part nobody tells women. The people who benefited from your old mask will often call your growth a problem. They will not ask what you discovered about yourself. They will ask why you changed. They will speak as if your boundary is a betrayal, as if your honesty is cruelty. This is not because you became worse. It is because your new self is no longer predictable, no longer endlessly accessible, no longer willing to carry what others refuse to face. So if you feel like you are losing people, consider this through Jung's lens. You may not be losing love. You may be losing a role. And the collapse of that role is not the end of your goodness. It is the beginning of your truth. The loneliness often arrives after the relief, which is why it feels so disorienting. At first, you think, finally, I can breathe. You stop forcing yourself into conversations that leave you depleted. You stop saying yes out of fear. You stop carrying other people's feelings like unpaid labor. There is a quiet freedom in that, a kind of internal exhale. But then you look around and realize the room has changed. Your phone is calmer. The group chat is suddenly quieter. Invitations slow down. And even when you have done nothing wrong, you feel strangely exposed, like you stepped out of a warm costume and the air is colder than you expected. This is the moment many women start second-guessing themselves. Maybe I got too intense. Maybe I got too serious. Maybe I am not fun anymore. But look closer at what actually shifted. You stopped feeding the old emotional system. You stopped bonding through gossip, through shared resentment, through the familiar ritual of being the one who listens, endlessly while never taking up space. You stopped over to prove your worth. You stopped playing the fixer who makes everyone feel better while quietly falling apart later. And when you remove that role, some connections do not end with a fight. They simply fade. Not because you attacked anyone, but because the glue was never love. It was your self-erasure. You see it in small social scenes that used to feel normal. A woman sits at lunch with friends and realizes the conversation has one currency: complaining, criticizing, dissecting other people's lives. She used to join in just to belong. This time, she stays quiet, not to judge anyone, but because her body cannot fake interest anymore. She doesn't add fuel, she doesn't perform outrage, she doesn't laugh at what feels cruel. Afterward, someone jokes that she has gotten so deep lately. Someone else says she has changed, and slowly, she is invited less. Not because she became mean, but because she no longer participates in the same rituals that kept everyone comfortable. Or a woman stops being the one who remembers every birthday, organizes every plan, checks in on everyone, mediates every conflict, and keeps the emotional wheels turning. She tells herself she is simply taking a breath. But the friendships that depended on her constant effort start dimming like lights without electricity. This is not proof that people are evil. It is proof that many relationships run on unspoken roles. When you stop supplying the energy, the structure reveals itself. Some connections were mutual, others were maintained by your nervous system, doing the work of a whole community. Jung would say, this is what happens when you step outside the invisible rules you did not even realize you were following. Every family, every friend group, every workplace has a quiet script. Keep the peace. Don't name what hurts. Don't change too much. Don't disrupt the story. When your persona falls, you stop obeying that script automatically. And for a while, it can feel like exile, but it may be something else entirely. It may be the space where your real life begins, the threshold between who you were trained to be and who you are becoming. So if you are standing in that quiet gap right now, not quite where you used to belong, not yet where you are going, can you pause and ask yourself this? What part of you is finally being born in this silence, and are you willing to let this threshold shape you instead of chasing the old costume back? Sometimes the first sign is not distance, but backlash. You do not just notice fewer invitations. You notice a new edge in people's voices, a subtle change in how they look at you, as if you have broken an unspoken rule. You set one gentle boundary, and suddenly you are being discussed, questioned, labeled. The same people who once praised your generosity now treat your limits like a personal attack. This is the moment the dark side becomes undeniable. When you raise your vibration, you don't only lose people, you trigger people. You see it in the simplest situations. A woman stops answering late-night crisis texts from a friend who only calls when she is falling apart. She replies the next morning with kindness, but also clarity. I care about you, but I can't be your emergency room anymore. I need rest. The friend does not say, I understand. The friend says, wow, you've changed. Another woman stops taking the bait in family arguments. She no longer defends, explains, or tries to be understood by people who have already decided who she is. She stays calm. She speaks less. And suddenly, she is accused of being distant, smug, and cold. In the workplace, a woman stops over-functioning. She stops fixing what others refuse to handle. She stops volunteering for the emotional labor no one notices. She does her job well and goes home. And then the whispers start. She thinks she's too good now. She's not a team player. She used to be so easy to work with. Jung called the engine behind this reaction shadow projection. It sounds academic until you live it. Shadow projection is what happens when someone cannot tolerate a truth about themselves, so they place it onto you. Your boundary becomes their shame. Your calm becomes their guilt. Your silence becomes their fear of being seen. You become the screen they throw their discomfort onto, because it is easier to accuse you of changing than to admit they relied on you staying the same. When someone has built their sense of comfort on your self-sacrifice, your sovereignty feels like betrayal, not because you harmed them, but because your growth makes their unconscious dependency visible. This is why you become cold the moment you stop performing warmth. You become selfish the moment you stop sacrificing. You become arrogant the moment you stop asking permission to exist. And if you are a woman who has spent years being liked for being agreeable, this can feel like social punishment. You might be tempted to over-explain, to send the long text, to justify your boundary with a full biography of your pain. But notice what happens when you do. Explanation invites negotiation. It tells the other person your limit is still up for debate. It gives them a door back into the old dynamic. From Jung's perspective, this is a crucial stage of individuation. The psyche is testing whether you will stay loyal to your emerging self or retreat back into the persona for approval. This is not about becoming harsh. It is about becoming solid. What you are building now is not a new attitude. It is an inner jurisdiction, a private law within you that says, my life is not public property. My energy is not a communal resource. My boundaries are not a discussion. So if people are turning against you, ask yourself gently, are they reacting to who you are, or are they reacting to the version of you they can no longer access? Here's the truth that closes the loop. You didn't lose everyone because you raised your vibration. You lost the version of you that kept everyone comfortable at your expense. You lost access points. You lost emotional contracts you never agreed to consciously. You lost the old identity built from guilt, pleasing, and survival. And yes, that can feel like losing everything, especially for a woman who has been praised her whole life for being easy to love because she was easy to use. When your phone goes quiet, when familiar faces become distant, when the room no longer claps for your sacrifice, the ache is real. You are not imagining it. You are grieving a life where belonging was purchased with self-abandonment. But Jung would remind you that the psyche cannot become whole while it remains socially obedient. Individuation always costs something, because it asks you to stop living as an extension of other people's comfort. It asks you to live from the self, not from the persona. And the self does not negotiate with the parts of you that were trained to disappear. It does not reward you with applause. It rewards you with alignment. It gives you a nervous system that can finally rest. It gives you a mind that no longer has to twist reality to stay connected. It gives you a heart that can love without dissolving. This is the lesson most women never receive until later in life. Not everyone who leaves was meant for the real you. Some people were meant for your role. Some people loved the version of you that never said no. Some people stayed as long as you stayed small. That does not mean you were unlovable. It means you were in a system, and systems resist change. When you stop feeding a dynamic, it exposes itself. The friendship that relied on your constant emotional labor fades. The family bond that required your silence gets tense. The workplace respect that depended on your overfunctioning turns into criticism. These are not signs that you failed. They are signs that your reality is finally visible. And here's the part that turns pain into power. You are not here to be universally liked. You are here to be psychologically whole. Wholeness is quieter than popularity. It is the ability to sit at a table and not abandon yourself to be accepted. It is the ability to leave a room without explaining. It is the ability to hold compassion without becoming a sponge. It is the ability to say, I love you, and also, this is my limit. That is not coldness, that is maturity. So when you say, I lost everyone, look deeper. You did not lose everyone. You lost illusions. You lost the false intimacy built on performance. You lost the approval that came from being endlessly available. And what you gained is worth more than any crowd. You gained your center. You gained your time back. You gained your dignity. You gained the ability to love without betraying your body. If you are standing in the quiet aftermath of change, let this be your new question. Who can meet me here, where I no longer disappear? And can I finally choose myself, even if it means fewer people can follow?
If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.